Okay, so this is a video game review for Warrior Kings Battles for the PC. This game was released in 2003 and is the sequel to the first Warrior Kings, released a year prior. It's again a mixed bag. It has quite a few clear improvements, but there are still some issues which hold me back from giving it a good score. That said, there's far more enjoyment to be had with this game compared with the first. The story in Warrior Kings Battles takes place roughly 100 years after the events of the first game. It's another Reconquer Europe style setting, although this time you get to choose which territories you wish to invade. You get different bonuses from acquiring them as well as going down certain paths, and it's all very straightforward and laid out. So the campaign sacrifices story and mission variety, as you kind of saw in the first game, for ease and accessibility. The missions have fewer events in them, they just feel like sort of very straight skirmish battles, but overall I feel everything taken into account, the changes that Black Cactus, the developers, made actually improves the single player campaign a lot. Even if the story is paper thin, the player shouldn't feel that the starter missions are too difficult either. I certainly didn't. Although, having said that, there is no difficulty setting, so like there wasn't in the original either. So if you find it too difficult or too easy, either way, I think it's just about right. But if you feel either way, then you're kind of stuck with that. As far as the game's looks are concerned, there's no noticeable upgrade. They released this a year after the first game, so in this sense it feels more like an expansion pack. I didn't really mind it much then, I don't really mind it much now. Given that what they didn't improve in graphics, they did in other more important areas of the game. Still, it should be said that the animations are still a bit messy and clunky like the first game, and getting in close, rather like in a few other games, isn't pretty. The music in the game is mostly carried over from the first game, with a slight industrial rock edge to it, in a few tunes here and there. And in that area of the game, in this area, music, it doesn't really do itself any favours. It doesn't help improve the experience. I feel Warrior Kings is a game series that the developers need a bit more time to give it some personality, and in the area of music it really lacks a decent theme. I recognise that few RTSs have Mario or Zelda-esque themes to them, but that doesn't mean they don't choose good music which complements their game. If you look at the game series of Command & Conquer and the Warcraft series, they usually choose pretty good music. When I was playing Warrior Kings Battles, I had to turn the sound effects down and turn the music just straight off and just stick on like a film soundtrack like Gladiator or Braveheart to give some kind of experience. The sound effects are incredibly grating, as from the first game, to listen to, and beginners will take some time working out what each effect actually represents, and there's still occasions where I haven't got a clue what's being said or what's being told to me. So definitely in terms of sound, Warrior Kings Battles and the Warrior Kings series still has some way to go. In terms of gameplay, there's an entirely new mode in Warrior Kings Battles, and that's the skirmish mode. While I like a good story in my RTS, this is a game whereby skirmish really does take precedence, in my opinion, and they've implemented it pretty well in this game. You can play with up to 7 other AI players, which is quite a lot, quite a few maps, a host of tweakable options such as removing Fog of War, which really increases the enjoyability of this game, increasing the population limit up to 800, which is impressive even at the time of this review, 2009, let alone 2003 when they released it. You can play in teams or have a diplomacy mode whereby during the game you can send messages of peace to various players. Included with the skirmish mode is a new AI general creating tool, and if this game was any better, I'd say it's almost its selling point, because it's really well done. It's a really fun, interesting tool which I would love to see in other RTSs. What you do is you create AI characters who all have different behavioural attributes, so you can make them, you can adjust their difficulty, you can adjust how much they like to raid as opposed to besiege players, whether they're military or economy focused, what types of troops they prefer, and you can see this play out in the game itself. So it really does make a difference, and it's a great feature. If only, the whole general game was a lot better, I'd be able to praise it a lot more. But having said that, playing through the skirmish, I do have a greater respect for the different alignments that Black Cactus put into this game. There are 5 in this game, and even though I didn't have a manual this time round like in the first one, I did, with a bit of practice because of the skirmish mode, with a bit of practice and observation, you can work out which buildings you need to go down the pagan or imperial path, and I did get around to summoning behemoths and archangels and all that sort of thing, as you'll probably see from this video. So that was a bit more interesting as well. It gave it a lot more variety than the Renaissance paths that I kept on travelling down the first time I ever played this game. With final mention to other gameplay issues, there are positives and negatives still to be thrown around. Little touches again, I mentioned plenty of them in the first review, but there's still more to say. Things like when the bodies of dead soldiers are left after a battle, you see these crows descend on them just before the bodies disappear. It's a nice way of justifying their decay. Also, the remnants of old settlements that you've destroyed during a mission, during a skirmish, remain even though you can still build on them, so they're still you don't just lose all that land that you've destroyed, you can actually build up another base or whatever, and it's just really nice sometimes in a very long mission to look across to see that settlement that you destroyed a few minutes ago is still there, which is quite good. Warrior Kings Battles also has a new idle peasants bar, which alerts you to idle peasants in your settlements, and it means that you can run them more efficiently, that you don't have some peasants that you tucked away somewhere just sitting around on their arse and not doing anything. So that's a nice addition to the game, and it's noticeably faster than the original, which was my biggest complaint. That said, there's still no speed settings, so when you're heavily under attack and you need to just slow things down a little bit, you can't. And likewise, if you find the pace a bit too slow and you want to speed things up, again you can, and it's something that has been overlooked again and really shouldn't have been. Camera control in this game is actually worse than it was in the first game. When you use the mouse wheel up and down, it tilts rather than pulls the camera back, and it doesn't entirely ruin the view, but it is noticeably worse, especially when you've got big armies to control. It just doesn't look quite as good. In a perfect world, you'd have both controls aligned to the camera, and I have seen it done, so it was a shame that this game kind of had this weird camera thing going on. It was a bit annoying. Also, pathfinding in enclosed bases can prove tricky, as shown here on a kind of fast forward mode, which can happen with large numbers. The unit AI, as it was in the first game, is also piss poor, as your units, if they're being shot by archers, will just basically sit around and take it. Even if there's one archer and just a whole host of cavalry, it doesn't really matter, they'll still just sit and take it. Overall, this game is a big improvement over the original. It's playable, in other words. That said, there's still a lack of polish to this game. A little bit of music, sound effects, some cinematic cutscenes, a bit more on the story. You know, there's plenty of areas where it's got work to do, but it is playable, and that's the important thing. It's a game series, like a few RTSs, that is just lacking a personality. It doesn't quite know what it wants to be, and as a result it feels a little bit strange to play. It's got some nice innovations, like a whole host that I've mentioned in the last couple of reviews, but other areas holding it back. A sequel that would build upon the improvements here would be welcomed by myself, but for now, Warrior Kings Battles gets a respectable 6.3 out of 10. And that's me.